13.4, the costs and advantages of home ownership. So we're going to do a lot of vocabulary here at the beginning, and then we're going to talk about some of the considerations to make when you are considering buying a home. That's what this section's all about. So some definitions first. A mortgage. A mortgage is a home loan for a substantial amount over a lengthy time interval. There's some other language that's similar to it. A deed of trust or a security deed is the same as mortgage. Okay, so those are words that mean the same thing. Down payment is just like it was for any of the other things we were doing with Ann and Andy. The down payment is the amount you initially pay. Okay, so depending on what kind of a loan you get, there's usually a down payment sort of baked in. So a conventional loan is a certain type of a loan, may require a 5% or a 10% or a 20% down payment. An FHA loan may require a 3% down payment. So there's different loans require different amounts of the payment, and it's usually a percentage-based payment. Term is the time until the loan finally pays off. So you get a 15-year mortgage, or you get a 20-year mortgage, or you get a 30-year mortgage. Those are the three that are most common. 15, 20, and 30s. 15 and 30s are the most common, actually. The principal amount of the mortgage is the amount of the loan minus the down payment. Right? It's the amount we're financing. Right? The amount that we're financing is the principal amount of the mortgage. A fixed rate mortgage. A fixed rate mortgage is the interest rate on the loan remaining constant throughout the term of the loan. Now, everything that we have done so far with the consumer credit things in all of our previous material have always been fixed rate. We haven't identified it that way. But the reason it's important to identify this now is because that's not the only way you can get a loan on a house. There are other options. A fixed rate option keeps it the same the entire time of the loan. If it's not, I can't remember if I have this later, but I think I do, but it's called a variable rate. Okay, there's a couple other words we can use for it too. We'll come across it later. But a fixed rate mortgage is the ones that we're going to be working with the most. Amortization is the process by which the initial balance, together with the interest due on the loan, is repaid to the lender, typically through regular, constant or periodic, typically monthly payments. Okay, so do you remember when we did the credit card thing where it showed like the running balance business? Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Where it showed this is how much we owe on this date, and we make this due, we do this payment, or we do this charge or whatever, and then it shows how much we do it. It's kind of like that. There's a running ticker. And when you get a home mortgage, they actually give you this running ticker for the entire length of the loan. I remember the first loan that we got. And I remember seeing it all written down. And we had gotten a 30-month loan, not recommending that. We made a lot of dumb stuff. That was one of the ones we did. 30-year loan. And it showed every single month how much it was going to change the amount that we owed every single month on this loan. It's a big, giant spreadsheet, okay? So that's an amortization schedule. Our regular monthly payments can be found using this formula. So this is the payment required to repay the loan of P dollars, together with an interest at an annual rate R over a term of T years. So you have the rate divided by 12 times the principal. That's the top. On the denominator, you have that 12 over 12 plus R to the power of 12T. It's subtracted from 1 and then used as a division. The last thing that you need to be aware of, for the moment anyway, is that there's something called closing costs. You've probably heard that phrase before. Closing costs or settlement costs are imposed when the loan is finalized, i.e. at closing. So there's money you have to bring to the table in excess of the loan situation for closing costs. They can be a variety of different things. It could be that you're paying some of the interest early as a requirement for the loan. It could be that you're responsible as the buyer to pay part of the realtor fees if there's a realtor involved. It could be that you're required by your lending institution to pay for some of the taxes or some of the insurance in advance. All those things. You have to bring a title fee. You have to pay money to have a clear title on the house. The title is the paper that says you really own it and somebody else doesn't. It's important. There's a fee associated with it. It could be that you had to pay for an inspection for the home. Closing costs they cover lots of things, okay? So those are closing costs. All right, so we've got Ann and Andy. Ann and Andy decide they're going to buy a home. They find the perfect house and negotiate with their realtor for a purchase price of $120,000. My numbers are dated, I know that, but it's okay. The numbers will work out easier if we keep them a little bit smaller, so we're just going to keep going with it. Purchase price of $120,000. They qualify with their credit union. Credit union's like a bank, for a $100,000 fixed rate loan with 3.75% interest rate on a 20-year schedule. There's a lot of details there. All those details come with the loan. So when you go and you get a loan on a house someday, you're going to get details just like that. So we're going to go step by step with some of the pieces of information that we need in order to figure out what's the payment they're going to have to make every month. That's really our end game here. They want to know what they're going to have to pay, right? So if you go out to like Zillow, it does this calculation for you automatically when you're looking at a particular home. It'll take all these variables into consideration and it'll find it for you. So we're going to start with the down payment. So what is the down payment that they would have to come up with for this loan based on the details we were given? $20,000. How'd you get that? Right. So in this case, it's a $120,000 note, right? Like that's the cost, rather, of the loan. That's the cost of the house. And it says they only qualify for $100,000. So there's not a percentage invoked here, although there could have been. This one is simply that's what they qualify for. So they only qualify for the $100,000, which means the rest of it they have to pay for as a down payment. So that's the $20,000. Okay. So $20,000 is what they're paying at the beginning. All right. I want to write this down. We're going to write down the formula actually for the regular monthly payment to start with, since we flipped pages. It is the principal, right, the amount that they're paying or loaning, getting a loan for. It's, the interest rate divided by 12. All of that's divided by 1 minus that same 12 over 12 plus the rate raised to the 12t. This is the formula we had on the previous slide. Okay, we have all this information now with the last piece that we already found. Okay, so what was P? 20,000 or 100,000, right? That's the amount of the actual loan. What is R? What was it over there? Yeah, so it's 3.75, so it's 0.0375. Interest rates vary considerably. Our first loan that we had was over 7%. That was a really good rate at the time. I'm not sure where they are now. I think they're close to about that right now again, actually. But the loan that we have on our house right now is closer to the 3.75 because of simply when we got the loan. So they vary drastically. We have this over 12, right? Okay. And then we have 1 minus the same 12 over 12 plus 0.0375. And all of that's raised to the 12t. What's t? The time, and time's always in years. It's always in years. How many years is this particular loan going to be for? 20 years. Okay? So this one's times 20. So a couple things, like we mentioned before, that I would still advise you to do is to go ahead and do things like multiply the exponents together, before you try and put something in, just to avoid any potential for your calculator to mess that up. So 12 times 20 is 240, I think, yeah? Look good? Okay, your calculator should be able to handle, as long as you have a scientific calculator or better, handle all these calculations to find this. If you wanted to kind of keep it a little bit more compact, where you do just a piece at a time, you could be welcome to find just the numerator, write it down, find just the denominator, write it down, and then do the division, and that would be fine too. If I do that for my numerator, I get 312.50. And then if I do that for the entire denominator, including the exponent, I get something with a bunch of decimals. And I want to keep as many decimals as sort of I can, because we do not want the rounding errors that can occur if we do not keep our decimals. So we get this ugly 0.52 ... going on. And if we divide this, we will get $592.89. Okay, pretty good so far? So that's the amount of money that goes every month to the bank for the mortgage alone. Okay? All right, we're going to take a look at an amortization schedule, at least a portion of one, in our next part. One mention before this. So I mentioned last time that we're big Dave Ramsey people. Conservative here is not conservative versus liberal. Conservative means careful or cautious, okay? So a conservative estimate for home ownership is a 15-year fixed rate with a 20% down payment. So Ann and Andy got the 20% down payment. Their length of their loan's a little bit longer. And that would cost you no more than 25% of your monthly take-home pay. You're known as house poor if you go over 25%. And it affects you a lot to go over 25% on the cost of your home or rent. Rent's true too. I have a daughter who's in the middle of getting an apartment. And I asked her the other day, I was like, are you comfortable with that number for the rent cost? Because it's high. Rent is high right now, right? And so are you comfortable with that rent cost based on your salary? And she said, yes, I am. And we looked at it together, right? So 25% of your monthly take-home pay. Okay, so here's an amortization schedule. We have these columns that are always going to be present. When MyMathLab gives you a problem like this, it's going to create this same table. And they're going to be columns that are labeled the same way. And you're just going to fill in the numbers in all the places, okay? The one that's easy is the payment one. The total payment right here is the amount that goes to the bank every month. It's what we just found as our monthly payment. Okay, so even if you get stuck on the rest of it, you can still fill in those two little boxes in this table because you already found them. They were $592.89 on the previous part of this problem. So this is $592.89 for each of these. Okay, everybody good with that? Okay, after that, things get a little bit more challenging because every other box on this table will not match one another. Okay, every single one will not. So we're going to take a look at finding the interest first. So we're going to do this 1 month at a time. So we're looking first at month 1. And we're going to find our interest. So the interest, if you'll remember, is I equals PRT. P that we're looking at right here is what we currently owe on the loan. So at the very beginning of all of this scenario, we owe $100,000, right? So this is going to be our $100,000. In a moment, it won't be $100,000 anymore because we will have paid a little bit of it off. It's going to change. The interest rate is the interest rate that we had talked about before, 0.0375. And time is interesting. Time is supposed to be in years, but this is for 1 month. How much is 1 month of a year? 1/12. So the T here, the time, is 1/12. Okay? 1/12, because that's the length of time. Yes?
Can we just try and put that in decimal, or would it be like repeat?
You mean the decimal, like the fraction 1/12?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can put it in a decimal. You're just going to want to keep a lot of the decimal places.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it's not a problem. All right, so you're going to calculate 100,000 times 0.0375 divided by 12. What are you going to get? I want to make sure your calculators are tolerating what you're putting in. Are they doing it? Yeah, it's 312.50. So back up here, this is my interest payment right here, 312.50. So let's think about what happens. You made a payment of almost $600. 312.50 of it did not pay for the house. It paid the bank for the luxury of borrowing the money, aka the interest. How much did you actually pay towards the value of the house? What would you have to do? You'd have to subtract. So when we're finding in here the second column, the principal payment, we take the value that we started at, we take the value that we paid, the $592.89, and we subtract off the interest, $312.50. And what will we get if we subtract those? Mm-hmm. 280.39. Does that sound right, Luke? Yeah? Okay. So up here, our principal payment was $280.39. The balance of the principal means how much money do I still owe for my house now? What did I owe at the very beginning? $100,000. How much of the money I sent to the bank actually went towards my balance? $280.39. Okay? So the balance down here is the amount that I owed at the beginning of that payment cycle, $100,000, and I subtract off the $280.39 that actually went towards the interest, or toward the payment, principal, excuse me, and I will get $99,719.60. So this is $99,719.60. So at the end of month 1, we've paid off almost $300 of the cost of the house. But when we go to month 2, while we find all our calculations the same way, all of the values change. I'm going to shrink this one and move it over so I have some space. And we're going to do month 2 right beside it. So for month 2, we're going to calculate again the interest. So the interest is the principal, but it's not the principal that we started with. It's the new principal. The amount we now still owe, it's the balance over here, the $99,719. That's now P. So $99,719.60. It's still the same interest rate, 0.0375, and it's still the length of time of 1/12 of a year. So all those pieces are the same. My interest is going to be a different value. It's going to be slightly less. The interest you pay each month is going to go down a little bit. This works on car loans and stuff too, by the way. It works on all your loans. This is not a special thing about mortgages, but. So when I calculate this, I'm going to get, I have $311.62. So my interest payment went from $312.50 down to $311.62. It didn't go down much, but it did go down, right? It did go down. How would I find how much of my $592 went towards the principal? You'd subtract it. So just like the problem before, the month before, we would have our principal payment by taking our $592.89 and subtracting the amount that was the interest that we just calculated, the $311.62. When we do that, we get a slightly higher amount that goes towards interest. Goes towards principal. So less goes towards interest, more goes towards principal. And this continues to happen over the entire length of the loan. Every month when I look at my mortgage right now, the little bit less went towards interest and a little bit more goes towards my principal. And the next month, a little bit less towards interest, a little bit more towards principal. So it's $281.27. And what would I do to find the balance that remains? I'd take the previous line, the $99,719.60, and you're exactly right. We would subtract off the $281.27, and we would have $99,438.34. Okay, so I'm sure you've heard the phrase before that owning is cheaper than renting. Have you heard that phrase before? You heard people say that? So what they mean when they say that is that your money is actually not all disappearing to the landlord. That's what's meant by that. The unfortunate thing is that there are costs associated with home ownership that you don't incur if you rent, and you need to be aware of them. So one of those costs is property taxes. So property taxes are collected by a county or other local government, and they can cost up to several $1,000s annually. I got my property tax thing in the mail recently, $3,800 for a year. That's my property taxes. That's what we owe on our house. Depending on where you live will depend on how much the property taxes cost. Different places cost different amounts, and they can vary significantly. Our cost of our property taxes when we lived in Ohio were a lot higher than in Oklahoma. They just were. Not only that, but they can actually cost, your property taxes can come both from your state, and they can also come from your city, depending on the way that the government in the state where you are located is structured. So you can end up paying property taxes in more than one sort of place, too. We owed how did it work? We had to pay taxes both in the city where I worked and in the city where I lived when we were in Ohio. There was a city tax. So, states are different. They just are. Every state has its own sort of nuances. I'll tell you what, though, our homeowner insurance, the next part here, was a lot cheaper in Ohio than it was in Oklahoma. Any guesses as to why? Tornadoes, you bet. So it varies a lot. It depends on the cost of payout, right, for these things. All right, so it can, your homeowner's insurance covers losses due to fire, storm damage, and other casualties. It also provides liability coverage if someone's hurt on your property. So if you have somebody in your home and they get hurt in the swimming pool in the backyard, your homeowner's insurance has a portion of that that's used to help pay for medical expenses. So there's other things that it does too. And it pays for things like theft, right? If you have a theft in your home. Hail. Hail's a big one in Oklahoma too. Not just hail and wind are a big one. Not just your tornadoes, but. And then maintenance. Maintenance can vary by the home due to its age, construction type, size, and condition. That's what got us this summer, right? The AC is going out, both of them. We have a septic system, and we have a water well. Those are things in our home where we live specifically right now that we didn't have to deal with where we lived before, because we lived inside of city limits before where it was city water. Right, so there's different costs that are associated with maintenance as well that you don't pay for if you rent. Right, $8,000 out of my budget this summer was a big hit. It's huge. So Ann and Andy find out that their taxes are going to cost $932 annually, and their insurance is going to cost $660. Okay? So what will often happen in a loan like this, especially the first ones that you get, is that they're going to require you to do something called escrow. Escrow means you pay in advance for the 6 months or to a year, depending on how the policy is written, for your home ownership, why am I blanking? Home insurance, that's what I want. The home insurance and the taxes in advance, okay? And then every month you pay that much as well, so that there's always a recurring balance. So when the insurance comes due, the bank actually sends the insurance money to Allstate or State Farm or whatever. That's how that would work. Okay, so Ann and Andy are going to have their regular monthly payment. That was our, let me use white. That was our $592.89. That's their regular monthly payment, right? And then they're going to also have a tax amount and an insurance amount. So the tax amount is $932, but they're just going to pay 1 month of it. So it's $932 divided by 12. It's the monthly amount for taxes. And then their insurance is $660. And they're going to divide that one as well by 12. It's the monthly amount for the taxes, or for the insurance. Okay? So you find each one of those quantities, add them together. And those are both things that you don't pay if you rent, right? So they are costs of home ownership specifically. And you get $725.56. All right. So you're going to luck out, aren't you? Madison's like, yes, I am. Okay, so we have a little bit more to do. We will finish it next time, which means this assignment won't be due on Thursday. We'll talk on Thursday about when I want it to be due. I don't necessarily want it to be due at your final exam because I don't want you doing this like 10 minutes before you come into my class taking your final exam, your last exam. But it will be pushed until a little bit later anyway. So we'll pause here.